there is a kind of pain that isn't like a knife stab. It's the poison poured into your life every day, for 2 whole years, by the very man you trusted for half a century. I welcomed his mistress into my home, cared for her like a daughter, and held their child as if they were my own grandchild. This is the true story of how a woman's kindness was turned into a weapon, and how the truth, no matter how brutal, burned 50 years of marriage to ash. If you're listening from anywhere in the world, please leave a comment and subscribe, because there are truths that need to be spread, even if they might shake your beliefs. There are stories that, no matter how painful, must be told. My life, until that day, was that of any woman my age in Phoenix. I would get up at 5 inches the morning to prepare the pies I would sell during the day. I took care of my house. I tended to Robert after his long days working in construction, and on Sundays we would go to church and visit my mother-in-law. It was a quiet routine, maybe a little boring for some, but it was my life, and I was content. I never suspected that my husband of 50 years could be capable of what he did. I never suspected that the kindness of my heart would become the perfect weapon for his betrayal. My story really begins 51 years ago, when I met Robert Miller at a state fair. I was 21 and he was 24. He was a handsome, hard-working man who knew how to win you over with sweet words and promises of a future. We got married the following year, in 1975, in a simple but love-filled ceremony at St. Anthony's Parish here in Phoenix. The early years were difficult, like for all young, working-class couples. Robert always worked in construction. He was a laborer, then a foreman, and over the years he managed to have his own small crew. We were never rich, but we never lacked for what we needed. I have always worked, selling pies. I learned the recipe from my mom, Mrs. Martinez, may she rest in peace, and over the years I perfected my flavor until I became one of the most sought-after pie vendors in the area. My sweet apple pies with raisins and the savory ones with beef became famous in the neighborhood. Our first big problem was that we couldn't have children. After 5 years of marriage and many doctor's visits, we were told it was very difficult for me to get pregnant. It was a terrible blow for both of us. Robert had always talked about having a large family, and I dreamed of being a mom. We cried a lot in those days. I remember Robert comforting me, saying it didn't matter, that he and I were enough, that our love was all we needed. "Elena," he would say, "we are a complete team. We don't need anything more." Those words gave me peace at the time. The years passed, and we built a solid life. In 1980, we were able to buy our little house in the San Marcos neighborhood, a small but comfortable house with 2 bedrooms, a large kitchen where I prepared my pies, and a small backyard where Robert installed a utility sink and planted some cacti and chili peppers. It was our little corner of the world, and there we grew old together, supporting each other through thick and thin. Robert was a man of very set routines. He would get up at 5:30 inches the morning. He'd eat his scrambled eggs with bacon and toast that I prepared for him and go to work. He would return between 3 and 4 inches the afternoon, have lunch, watch the news on television, and in the evenings, he would sometimes go for a few beers with his co-workers at Joe's Bar, which was a few blocks from the house. Sundays were sacred for going to 7 a.m. Mass and visiting his mother, Mrs. Margaret. I had my own routines. At 4:30 inches the morning, I was already in the kitchen preparing the pie dough, cooking the meat, preparing the fillings. By 7 inches the morning, I had everything ready to go out with my large cart and my folding table to sell on the corner of Independence Avenue and Morelos Street, where I had had my fixed spot for years. I sold from 8 inches the morning until 2 inches the afternoon, or until I ran out of pies. In the afternoons, I cleaned the house, did the laundry, and prepared everything for the next day. On Saturdays, I would go to the market to buy the ingredients for the week. During all those years, Robert was a husband I considered good. He wasn't very affectionate, But he wasn't bad to me either. He didn't drink to excess, he didn't yell at me. He always gave me money for the house, and we shared important decisions. I believed we had a solid marriage, the kind that lasts a lifetime. My friends told me I was lucky, that Robert was a responsible and hard-working man. Elena, my friend Patricia would say, "Your Robert is one of the good ones, not like others who are at the bar every day or don't bring money home." Robert's family was always small. His father died when he was young, and only he and his mother, Mrs. Margaret, who lived in the working-class neighborhood, were left. She was always good to me, treated me like a daughter, and I loved her very much. Since she was widowed, we took on the responsibility of helping her with her expenses and visiting her constantly. She was an elderly woman, 95 years old, but still full of energy. As for my family, my parents had already passed away by that time. I have 2 sisters, Carol and Judith, who live in Denver, Colorado, and a brother, David, who lives here in Phoenix, but on the other side of the city. We see each other at family parties and birthdays, but we're not very close. Everyone has their own life and their own problems. Everything changed on the 15th of March 2022. It was a Tuesday, like any other. I had finished selling my pies and was arriving home around 2:30 the afternoon, when I found Robert already home, sitting at the kitchen table with a very serious expression. It wasn't normal for him to be home at that hour on a workday. "Elena," he said without even greeting me, "I have something very important to talk to you about. Sit down." I sat down across from him, worried. I thought maybe he had had problems at work or that something had happened to Mrs. Margaret, but I never imagined what he was going to tell me. It turns out I have a first cousin in Tucson, the daughter of my Uncle Hector. Do you remember I told you about him? The truth is, Robert rarely spoke of his family beyond his mother, but I nodded for him to continue. "You see, there's, when you've lived with a man for 50 years, you think you know everything about him. Looking back, I should have known something was strange right then and there, but sometimes kindness makes you blind. You only want to believe in the good things." Her name is Sophia. She's 32 years old and is going through a very difficult situation. She recently divorced and was left without a house and without a job. Besides, she's sick. She has thyroid problems that have left her very weak. My Uncle Hector called me yesterday to ask if I could help her because she has nowhere to go. I remained silent, waiting for him to tell me what exactly the favor was that they had asked for, although I was already imagining it. I told him yes, that she could come stay with us for a while, until she gets her health back and finds a job. She's arriving on Thursday. She's going to stay in the back room. The back room was the second bedroom of the house that we used as a storage room to keep my pie-making supplies, winter clothes, and other things we didn't use frequently. It was a small but comfortable room, with a single bed that we rarely used. You know, as I was cleaning that room, I felt a little flicker of joy. It had been just the 2 of us in that house for so long. I thought that having someone new to care for, to cook for, might make life a little less boring. I never imagined that my own kindness was paving the way for the biggest tragedy of my life. My first reaction was surprise, not annoyance. In 50 years of marriage, Robert had never mentioned this cousin, but I thought it was natural that there was family I didn't know, and it seemed like a charitable act to help a woman who was going through difficult times. "And is she very sick?" I asked. "Yes, that's why she looks very thin and very pale. The doctor told her she needs rest and good nutrition. That's why I thought that here with your care and your good cooking, she would get better faster." I felt flattered that Robert trusted my abilities to care for a sick person. I had always liked helping people, and the idea of having someone else in the house after so many years of just the 2 of us wasn't entirely disagreeable. "All right," I said. "Let's clean the room and get everything ready for her to be comfortable. How long do you think she'll stay?" "I don't know, Elena. It depends on how soon she feels better and finds a job. It could be a few months." It's in these moments of simple kindness that the deepest betrayals often begin. Elena's good heart saw a family member in need, never suspecting she was welcoming a viper into her own home. Stay with us to see what happens when Sophia finally arrives. That afternoon, we cleaned the back room thoroughly. We took out all the things we had stored in there, washed the curtains, cleaned the window, and I put clean sheets on the bed. Robert even bought some flowers to put in a pot on the window, which caught my attention because he never paid attention to those details, but I thought he wanted his cousin to feel welcome. On Thursday, the 17th of March, Robert left work early to pick up his cousin from the Greyhound bus station. I was nervous, as I always am when meeting someone new. I put on my navy blue dress that I wear for special occasions and prepared roast chicken for dinner, thinking it was a nice meal that the new guest would like. They arrived around 6 inches the evening. I heard the gate open and Robert talking to someone. I came out of the room to greet them, and that's when I saw Sophia for the first time. She was a young woman, about 32, very thin indeed, with long black hair, very pale skin, and a pretty face, but with a tired expression. She was wearing a long skirt and a loose, long-sleeved blouse, and was only carrying a small suitcase and a shopping bag. "Elena," Robert said. "This is Sophia, my cousin." "Nice to meet you," she said in a very soft, timid voice. "I'm sorry for the trouble, ma'am. My cousin told me that you are a very good person and that you would help me." "Please, don't worry," I replied. "That's what we're here for, to help each other in the family. How are you feeling?" "Robert told me you've been sick." "Yes, I've had a lot of health problems, but I'm feeling a little better now. Thank you so much for having me in your home. That first night, the three of us had dinner together. Sophia ate very little. She said her stomach was still upset from the medication. She spoke very little during dinner, only answering when we asked her something. She told us that she had worked in a clothing store in Tucson, but when she got sick, she had to leave the job because she felt very weak. She didn't talk much about the divorce, only that it had been a very painful situation and that she preferred not to remember it. After dinner, Robert showed her to her room and explained where the bathroom and kitchen were. I left her some clean towels and told her that if she needed anything, not to hesitate to ask me. "Thank you, Mrs. Miller," she said. "You are very kind. I promise I won't be a bother." That night, when Robert and I went to bed, I commented that she seemed like a very polite girl and that I felt sorry for her, seeing her so sick and sad. "Yes," Robert said. "She's been through a lot of difficult things, but you'll see, with your care, she'll get better soon." And so began what would be the strangest and most painful period of my life, though I didn't know it yet. The first few days with Sophia in the house were an adjustment for everyone. She would get up late, around 9 or 10 inches the morning, when I was already back from selling my pies. She stayed in her room most of the time. She only came out to go to the bathroom or to join us for meals. She said she felt very tired and that the doctor had recommended a lot of rest. I tried to make her feel comfortable and loved. I prepared nutritious broths for her, chamomile tea for her stomach, and always served her well at meals. Robert was also very attentive to her. He would ask her how she felt, if she needed anything, if she had slept well. It made me happy to see my husband being so considerate of a family member in need. The routine of the house changed completely. Before, when Robert came home from work, we would sit and talk about our day, watch the news together, or just relax in the living room. Now, as soon as he arrived, the first thing he did was ask about Sophia. He would go to her room to greet her and sometimes stay and chat with her for a long time. He told me he wanted to make sure his cousin felt accompanied and knew she could count on us. At first, it seemed normal and even nice that Robert was such a good host. But after a few weeks, I started to notice things that caught my attention without being able to explain exactly why they bothered me. For example, Robert started coming home with small gifts for Sophia. One day he arrived with some fashion magazines, another day with chocolates, another with a special shampoo that he said was good for damaged hair. When I asked him why he was spending money on those things, he said he wanted his cousin to feel loved and to cheer her up a bit, that she looked very depressed. I also noticed that Robert started to pay more attention to his personal appearance. He had always been a clean man, but not vain. Suddenly he started using a cologne I had never known him to wear. He bought new shirts more often and even got his hair cut more frequently. When I asked him about it, he said it was to look more presentable now that there was a guest in the house. Sophia, for her part, remained very quiet and shy with me, but I began to notice that she behaved differently with Robert. When he was present, she smiled more, talked a little more, and even dressed better. When I was alone with her, she went back to being the quiet, melancholic girl she always was. One day, about a month after Sophia arrived, I asked Robert if he had been able to contact his Uncle Hector to find out how things were in Tucson. "What Uncle Hector?" he asked, confused. "The father of Sophia, the one who called you to ask for help." "Oh yes, of course," he answered quickly. "Yes. I spoke with him last week. He says things are still the same there, that there's still no work, and that it's better for Sophia to stay here until she feels completely well." But that answer seemed a bit strange to me. Robert had hesitated when I mentioned his uncle, as if he didn't know who I was talking about, and I had never seen him talk on the phone with anyone from Tucson. But I thought that maybe I was being too suspicious and tried to get those ideas out of my head. A woman's intuition is never wrong, my dears. At that very moment, a little voice inside was warning me, but I pushed it aside. I chose to trust my husband of 50 years over my own instincts, a mistake that I would later pay for dearly. The months of April and May passed, and Sophia continued to live with us. According to her, she felt better, but she still wasn't ready to look for a job. I started to suggest that we could help her look for jobs in stores or restaurants in Phoenix, but she always found excuses, that she still felt weak, that she had a doctor's appointment, that it was better to wait a little longer. During those months, I started to notice more strange things. For example, one day I came home earlier than usual from selling my pies, around 12 noon, and I found Robert at home. He told me he had left early because there was no work that day, but it seemed strange that he hadn't told me, and he was with Sophia in the living room watching television together, very chatty. When I arrived, they both immediately fell silent, as if they had been talking about something they didn't want me to hear. That feeling. I'm sure many of you women have experienced it. The feeling of suddenly being an outsider in your own home. Their silence in that moment was more terrifying than 1,000 lies. It was cold, and it was calculated. It was in these moments that a quiet, creeping poison began to seep into my heart. A cold knot would tighten in my stomach, a feeling I would quickly push away, chiding myself for being a foolish, jealous old woman. "He's just being kind to his family," I'd whisper to myself while washing the dishes. "You've always wanted a bigger family, Elena. Don't ruin it with suspicion." But the poison remained. It was the silence that was the loudest, the shared glances between them that I wasn't meant to see, the way their laughter would die the moment I entered a room. I was beginning to feel like a stranger in my own home, a kind warden in a prison of politeness where I was the only one who didn't know the rules of the game. Another day, when I went to clean Sophia's room, I found that she had new clothes that I hadn't seen before. When I asked her about it, she said that she had asked some friends from Tucson to send her some things by mail, but I had never seen any package arrive, and it also seemed strange that she had money to buy clothes if she supposedly didn't have a job. I also started to notice that Sophia didn't look as sick as when she arrived. In fact, she looked prettier, with better color, and had even gained some weight. When I commented that she looked much better, she said it was due to my care and my good food, which made me feel proud, but also made me wonder if she wasn't ready to become independent. In June, things got weirder. One day, Sophia asked me if I could prepare some special teas for her because she had read that they were good for a condition she had. I asked her what condition, and she said she had hormonal problems related to her thyroid. I prepared chamomile tea, mint tea, linden tea, everything I could think of that might be good for that. But later, doing some research with my friend Patricia, who knows a lot about home remedies, she told me that those teas were also good for nausea and pregnancy discomfort. It struck me then how clever the lie was. The symptoms of early pregnancy, fatigue, nausea, weakness, could easily be disguised as a thyroid condition. When I mentioned this to Sophia, she got very nervous and told me no, that she was definitely not pregnant, but that possibility stuck in my head because I started to notice other details. Sophia had started to eat with more appetite, especially strange cravings like pickles and ice cream or bean burritos with a lot of salsa. I had also seen her run to the bathroom several times in the morning as if she were nauseous. One night in July, around 11, I heard noises in the kitchen. I got up, thinking that maybe someone had broken into the house, and I found Sophia eating slices of toast with peanut butter and jelly. She told me she had woken up very hungry and couldn't resist the urge to eat something sweet. We talked for a while that night, and for the first time, I saw her more relaxed with me. She told me a little more about her life in Tucson, about the job she had had, about how she had felt when she got divorced. "Mrs. Miller," she said, "did you ever think about having children?" The question hurt me, as those questions always did, but I told her our story. How Robert and I had tried to have a family and it hadn't been possible. "How sad," she said. "You would have been a very good mom. It's clear that you like to take care of people." "And you, my dear?" I asked. "Have you ever thought about getting married again and having children?" She was quiet for a long time, and then she said, "I don't know, ma'am. Sometimes life doesn't turn out the way you plan." That conversation stayed with me because I felt that Sophia wanted to tell me something more, but she didn't dare, and because when I asked her about having children, she had a very strange expression, as if of guilt or fear. In August, things got more complicated. Robert started making up excuses to leave the house in the afternoons, that he had to go buy material for the construction site, that he had to talk to a client, that he was going to see his mom. But when I spoke with Mrs. Margaret on Sundays, she told me that Robert hadn't been to visit her all week. And when I asked him about his outings, he got annoyed and told me I was too nosy, that he was free to go out whenever he wanted. One afternoon, I decided to follow him without him noticing. He started walking toward downtown, and I followed him, keeping my distance. To my surprise, he didn't go anywhere in particular. He just took a walk in the park, bought an ice cream, and came back to the house after an hour. When he arrived, he told me that he had had to resolve some very complicated work matters. I didn't understand why he had lied to me about something as simple as taking a walk, but I didn't confront him either. In September, I began to seriously suspect that Sophia was pregnant. She couldn't hide it as much anymore. A small bump was noticeable in her belly, and her behaviors were too obvious. She ate at odd hours, had morning sickness, and had even changed the way she dressed, wearing looser blouses and girdles. One morning, I decided to confront her directly. I knocked on her bedroom door and told her I needed to talk to her. "Sophia," I said, "I think you're pregnant. I've had many friends who have gone through this, and I recognize the signs. Why haven't you told me the truth?" She started crying immediately, and after much insisting, she confessed that, yes, she was about 4 months pregnant. "And the baby's father?" I asked. "It's my ex-husband," she said. "When we separated, I didn't know I was pregnant. Now he doesn't want to take responsibility, and that's why I have nowhere to go. Please, don't tell your husband. I'm so ashamed that you know I'm an abandoned and pregnant woman." I felt very sorry for her situation. A young, divorced, pregnant woman without support from the father of her child. I told her she could trust me, that we would help her until she had the baby and could get on her feet. I also told her that she had to tell Robert because he had the right to know the truth about his cousin's situation. "Please, let me tell him," she asked. "I want to explain things in my own words." I agreed, but I told her she had to do it soon because she wouldn't be able to hide the pregnancy for much longer. That night, Sophia told Robert the truth. I was in the kitchen, but I could hear the conversation from her room. Robert was very understanding and told her not to worry, that we would support her in everything she needed. He also promised that he would find a way to contact the baby's father to make him take responsibility for his obligations. I was proud of my husband that night. I thought he was a good and generous man who was willing to help a family member in trouble regardless of the complications. I never imagined that everything I was experiencing was a carefully constructed lie. The following months were very busy at home. I dedicated myself to caring for Sophia as if she were my own daughter. I prepared special meals for her so the baby would grow healthy. I accompanied her to all her doctor's appointments, bought her maternity clothes, and even started knitting booties and blankets for when the baby was born. Robert also seemed very involved in the pregnancy. He bought vitamins for Sophia, worried that she was eating well, and even accompanied us to the doctor a few times. It seemed a little strange that he was so attentive to a cousin that, according to him, he hadn't seen in years, but I attributed it to him being a kind person. During those months, I developed a genuine affection for Sophia. I saw her as the daughter I never had, and her pregnancy filled a void I had in my heart. I was excited about the idea of a baby in the house, of finally being able to care for a small child, even if it was someone else's. In December, when Sophia was 8 months along, we started to prepare everything for the baby's arrival. We set up a corner of her room as a nursery. We bought a crib, diapers, bottles, and everything necessary. I was more excited than ever. On the 15th of January 2023, Sophia started having contractions. It was a Sunday morning, and Robert had gone out early to buy the newspaper. When he returned and I told him what was happening, he got very nervous. More nervous than I would have expected for just being the future mother's cousin. We went to the hospital, and after 8 hours of labor, a beautiful baby girl weighing 7 pounds was born. Sophia named her Olivia. When they let me hold the baby for the first time, I cried with emotion. It was the most beautiful feeling I had ever had in my life, holding that little creature in my arms. Robert was also very moved when he met the baby. He held her very carefully, spoke to her softly, and would just stare at her, captivated. "What a precious baby," he would say. "She's going to grow up to be a very smart girl." We returned home 3 days later, and a new stage in our lives began. Now there were 4 of us in the house: Robert, me, Sophia, and little Olivia. I dedicated myself body and soul to caring for both of them. I would get up in the middle of the night when the baby cried. I bathed her. I fed her when Sophia couldn't breastfeed. I changed her diapers. I rocked her to sleep. It was as if I had finally found my purpose in life. Sophia recovered well from the birth, but she seemed very tired and sometimes sad. She told me she felt guilty for depending on us, that she didn't know how she was going to repay us for everything we were doing for her. I told her not to worry, that we were family, and that the important thing was that both she and the baby were well. During those first months after Olivia's birth, I noticed that Robert continued to behave strangely. He spent a lot of time playing with the baby, buying her toys and clothes, and staying in Sophia's room helping her with the baby's care. When I commented that he seemed very attached to the baby, he would say that he had always wanted to be an uncle, and that since we hadn't had children, Olivia was like the grandchild we had been waiting for. But there was something that didn't add up in all of this. Robert behaved with Olivia not like an uncle, but like a father. The way he held her, the way he looked at her, the patience he had with her, Everything reminded me of how I've seen new fathers behave with their babies. And with Sophia, he was also too attentive and affectionate, more than one would expect with a cousin. One night in March, about 2 months after Olivia was born, I couldn't sleep and got up to get a glass of water. When I passed by Sophia's room, I heard quiet voices. I got closer without making a sound and could hear part of a conversation between Robert and Sophia. "We can't go on like this," Sophia was saying. "It's unfair to her." "I know," Robert replied, "but it's not the right time yet. Give me a little more time to think about how we're going to handle things. The baby is growing, and every day she looks more like you. Elena is going to start suspecting. Sophia, please, be patient. Everything will be all right." That was the moment, wasn't it? The instant a vague fear crystallizes into a cold, hard truth in the silence of her own home. A wife's intuition is a powerful thing, but what Elena does with this terrible knowledge will determine the rest of her life. I stood there frozen, listening to that conversation. What were they talking about? What was unfair to me? Why did Sophia say the baby looked like Robert? What was I going to start suspecting? I went back to my room with my heart pounding, unable to fully process what I had heard. I tried to find logical explanations for that conversation, but all the options that came to mind were too terrible to consider seriously. That was when the real fear began to set in. A wife's heart, a woman's heart, starts to question everything once it's been wounded. You know, sometimes it feels safer to live in a sweet lie than to face a truth that could destroy your entire world. And right then, I was terrified of that truth. The next morning, I looked at Olivia with new eyes. She was a 2-month-old baby, but some features were already distinguishable. She had dark hair like Sophia, but her eyes were light, like Robert's. The shape of her nose also resembled my husband's, and she had a dimple in her chin, just like Robert. Over the next few weeks, that terrible suspicion grew in my mind like a tumor. I began to pay more attention to the behaviors of Robert and Sophia, looking for signs that would confirm or dismiss my fears. The signs began to multiply like raindrops before a storm. And I, who had been a trusting woman for 50 years, became a detective in my own home. But I wasn't just any detective, but a 70-year-old woman who was beginning to realize that her whole life had been a lie. I started to write down in a little notebook, the kind I used to keep track of my pie sales, everything that seemed suspicious. I wrote down the dates, the times, what I saw, what I heard. It was as if I needed physical evidence to convince myself of what my heart already knew. On the 5th of April, I wrote, "Robert came home with special expensive diapers for Olivia, without anyone having asked for them. When I asked him why he had spent so much money, he got upset and said that a baby deserved the best." On the 10th of April, Sophia was taking a shower and Olivia started to cry. Robert picked her up and calmed her down in seconds, as if he knew exactly what she needed. Then he continued to hold her for more than an hour, just looking at her and smiling. On the 15th of April, I saw Robert stroke Sophia's head while she was breastfeeding the baby. It was a very intimate gesture, not how you touch a cousin. Each note in that notebook was like a stab in the heart, but I needed the truth even if it hurt. For 50 years, I'd always chosen to believe the best in people, but life was teaching me a hard lesson. Sometimes, being too kind just makes you a fool. One afternoon, when Sophia was sleeping, and Olivia too, I decided to check their room. I'm not proud of having done it, but I needed to find something that would give me peace, even if it was the evidence of the worst betrayal. I looked through her clothes, her papers, her personal belongings. In a small bag that she had hidden under the bed, I found something that changed my life forever. They were photos of Sophia and Robert together, hugging, kissing. They weren't recent photos. It was clear they had been taken months before, perhaps during the period when she supposedly lived in Tucson. In one of the photos, Sophia had a small pregnant belly, and Robert had his hand on her stomach with an expression of happiness I had never seen on him in our 50 years of marriage. I also found hospital papers from where Olivia was born. On the birth certificate, on the line where the father's name should be, it was blank. But there was another document, an application for acknowledgement of paternity that Sophia had filled out but hadn't submitted. On that application, the father's name was Robert Miller, my husband. I sat on their bed with those papers in my hands, and for the first time in my life, I felt what it must be like to die while still alive. I couldn't cry, I couldn't scream, I couldn't even breathe properly. It was as if my whole world had disintegrated in seconds, and I was falling into an infinite void. There is no pain quite like the one that comes from seeing cold, hard proof of a lie you've been living. The life Elena knew is gone forever, but this moment of absolute devastation is also a turning point. Stay with us to see how this heartbroken woman begins to find her strength. Every pain is unique, but the pain of being systematically deceived by the person you trusted most in the world, it truly is a kind of death while you're still living. Each photograph, each document wasn't just proof, it was a knife twisting deeper into this old heart of mine. Then I understood everything. Sophia had never been his cousin, she was his mistress. They had been in a relationship for months, maybe years. He had gotten her pregnant, and when they could no longer hide the pregnancy, they invented this story of the sick cousin to bring her to live in my house. I had been taking care of my husband's mistress for almost 2 years. I had taken care of her pregnancy. I had been present at the birth of her daughter. I had cared for that baby as if she were my granddaughter, when in reality she was the living proof of the greatest betrayal they could have committed against me. But the most painful thing of all was realizing that it hadn't been just a momentary betrayal. It had been a planned, elaborate betrayal sustained day after day for 2 years. Every morning when I get up to prepare my pies, every afternoon when I returned tired from work, every night when I lay down next to Robert, believing he was my life partner, he knew he was deceiving me in the cruelest way possible. I sat there for I don't know how long, trying to process all the information. I remembered every detail of the last 2 years in this new light, and everything started to make sense. The constant gifts for Sophia, the exaggerated attention, the way he behaved with the baby, the mysterious outings, the conversations that stopped when I arrived. I also remembered all the times I had felt that something wasn't right, all the times my instinct had warned me that something was strange, and how I had decided to ignore those signs because I trusted my husband. I felt like the most foolish woman in the world, like a ridiculous old woman who had allowed herself to be deceived in her own home. But foolishness quickly turned to a cold, hard rage. The true hell began in the days that followed, the days of pretending. Every meal I served them felt like poison in my own hands. Every time I held Olivia, her innocent face a painful mosaic of their features, my heart would both swell with love and shatter with betrayal. His touch, once a comfort of 50 years, now made my skin crawl. I had to smile when he kissed my cheek, listen to his lies about his day at work, and watch him play the doting father to his secret child, all while my soul was screaming. I was an actress in the final act of my own tragedy, and the applause I received was their blissful ignorance of my discovery. When I started to hear noises in the house, I quickly put everything back in its place and left the room. Sophia had woken up and was warming a bottle for Olivia. She greeted me with the same shy smile as always, as if nothing had happened, as if she hadn't been lying to my face for 2 years. "How are you feeling, Mrs. Miller?" she asked. "You look a little pale." "I'm fine," I replied, trying to keep my voice from shaking, just a little tired. That night, when Robert came home from work, he greeted me with a kiss on the cheek, as he had done thousands of times in our marriage. But now that kiss burned like acid. I wanted to slap him, to scream everything I had discovered, to throw them both out of my house immediately. but something stopped me. A voice in my head told me that I had to think carefully about what I was going to do, that I couldn't act on impulse. During dinner, I watched the two of them interact. Now that I knew the truth, it was obvious there was an intimacy between them that I had misinterpreted all this time. The way he passed her, the salt before she asked for it. How they looked at each other when they thought I wasn't watching. The way they coordinated Olivia's care without needing to agree on it. They were a couple, a family, and I was the intruder in that relationship, even though it was my own house. That night I couldn't sleep. I lay next to Robert, listening to his peaceful breathing, wondering how many nights he had slept like this, satisfied with his perfect lie. I wondered if he had ever felt guilt, if he had ever thought about the harm he was doing to me, or if he had simply decided that I was so stupid that I would never notice. The following days were a hell of pretending. I had to keep acting as if nothing had happened, as if I were still the naive and trusting Elena I had been for 2 years. I had to keep taking care of Olivia, even though now, every time I saw her, I remembered she was the product of deceit. I had to keep being kind to Sophia, even though I wanted to scream at her that she was shameless, that she had abused my hospitality and my kindness. But above all, I had to keep sharing a bed with Robert, pretending to be the same wife as always, when inside I was dying of rage and pain. One night, about a week after my discovery, Robert tried to be affectionate with me. He hugged me and told me that he loved me, that I was the best and most generous woman he had ever known. Those words that once would have filled me with happiness now sounded like the cruelest lies in the world. How could he tell me he loved me when he had his mistress living in my house? How could he call me generous when he had taken advantage of my generosity to deceive me? But also, that night, something changed inside me. The sadness and pain began to transform into something else, into anger, into a cold, calculated anger that I had never felt before. It wasn't the hot anger that makes you scream and throw things. It was something deeper and more dangerous. It was the anger of a woman who had been humiliated for 2 years and who was deciding that she would no longer allow them to continue abusing her. I began to plan my revenge that very night, but it wasn't going to be an impulsive and emotional revenge. It was going to be an intelligent, calculated revenge, one that would hurt them as much as it had hurt me to discover the truth. I realized I had an advantage. They didn't know that I knew. They still believed I was the same naive woman as always, and that gave me a power I had never had before, the power to choose when, how, and where I was going to act. Over the following days, I continued to watch them and gather more evidence. I no longer did it to confirm my suspicions, but to better plan my strategy. I took pictures with my cell phone of important documents, recorded conversations when I could, and started to investigate things I hadn't wondered about before. I discovered that Robert had opened a new bank account a year ago, which I knew nothing about. I discovered that he had been spending much more money than he gave me for household expenses. I discovered that he had bought things for Sophia and for the baby with money that was supposedly for construction materials. I also discovered that Sophia had been receiving money from Robert, money that she claimed was from her job in Tucson. It was all a perfectly constructed web of lies, and I had been the perfect victim, a trusting, kind woman who wanted to help others and didn't ask uncomfortable questions. But those days of investigation also taught me something about myself that I had never known. I discovered that I was much smarter than I had ever believed. I discovered that I had abilities I had never used. For my entire adult life, I had been a woman who lived to serve others. But now I was learning to live for myself, for my dignity, for my justice. The decisive moment came one afternoon in May. Robert had supposedly gone to work, but I knew he didn't have work on Thursdays. Sophia had gone for a walk with Olivia, something she did every afternoon at the same time. I decided to take advantage of that moment to do something I had been planning for weeks. I went into their room and looked for more evidence. This time I found something I didn't expect, a cell phone that Sophia kept hidden. Upon checking it, I found messages between her and Robert that confirmed everything I already knew, but also revealed details that broke my heart. The messages showed that their relationship had started 3 years earlier, when Robert met Sophia on a construction job in Tucson. The messages showed that they had planned the whole sick cousin strategy together. But what hurt me the most were the messages where they made fun of me, where Sophia told Robert that I was very easy to fool, and where he replied that I was too good to suspect anything. There was a message that Sophia had sent him a month before that said, "Every day I feel more guilty, seeing how Elena takes care of us and treats us with so much affection. She is a very good woman and doesn't deserve this." And Robert's response had been, "Don't feel bad. She's happy taking care of the baby. It's as if she finally has the family she always wanted. In a way, we're doing her a favor." Can you feel that? That's the sound of a heart breaking and then hardening into steel. It's one thing to be betrayed, but it's another to be pitied and mocked by your betrayers. This single message is the fuel that will ignite a fire they never saw coming. That message was what finally broke me, and, at the same time, what gave me the final strength I needed. They had not only betrayed me, but they had convinced themselves that they were doing me a favor. They had justified their lie by telling themselves that I was happy being their servant, taking care of their daughter and maintaining their house while they lived their love story at my expense. That's when I knew exactly what I was going to do. And I knew it wasn't just going to be revenge, it was going to be justice. It was going to be the recovery of my dignity. It was going to be the moment when Elena Miller, the pie vendor who had spent a lifetime serving others, would finally live for herself. The decision on how I was going to confront Robert and Sophia didn't come to me overnight. For several weeks, after discovering the whole truth, I dedicated myself to thinking and rethinking what would be the best way to act. I didn't want to be impulsive because I knew that if I acted solely out of anger, I would probably do something I would later regret. But I also couldn't continue living that lie for another day. Throughout the month of May, while I continued to care for Olivia and attend to Sophia as if nothing had happened, my mind was constantly working, designing different scenarios. Would I confront them in private? Would I throw them out of the house without explanation? Would I talk to Robert alone first? Or would it be better to expose them publicly so that everyone would know what kind of people they were? Each option had its advantages and risks, but there was one thing I was very clear about. I wanted them to feel as humiliated and exposed as I had felt when I discovered the truth. I wanted them to experience the same feeling of having their world destroyed in seconds, the same shame of knowing that other people knew their lie. I also had to think about the practical consequences. The house was mine. I had also paid for it with my 45 years of work selling pies. Robert couldn't kick me out of my own house, but I also knew that if things got very ugly, I might have to seek legal support, and for that, I needed to have all the documentation in order. One afternoon, while Sophia was taking a nap, and Olivia too, I sat at the kitchen table with all the papers I had found and began to organize my evidence. I made copies of the photos, the cell phone messages, the hospital documents. I also wrote a detailed timeline of everything that had happened since the day Robert told me his cousin was coming to stay with us. Seeing everything laid out on that table, the magnitude of the deceit hit me again. They hadn't been small or casual lies. It had been a complete operation with fabricated stories, false documents, daily performances. They had turned my life into a theater where I was the only character who didn't know she was acting in a play. The moment of truth arrived on Saturday, the 3rd of June. That morning, Robert got up very early and told me he had to go to work for half a day, that there was an emergency at a construction site. Sophia also got up early, which was rare because she usually slept in on weekends. She told me she was going to take Olivia to meet a friend who wanted to see the baby. Something in the way they behaved that morning made me suspect they had planned to go out together. They left separately, a few minutes apart, but they had probably arranged to meet somewhere. I decided to follow them. I put on my most discreet clothes and left the house a few minutes after Sophia. I followed her, keeping my distance, and sure enough, she walked to the corner of Lopez Mateos Avenue, where Robert was waiting for her in his truck. I saw them get into the vehicle together with Olivia, like a normal family going for a drive on a Saturday morning. They looked happy, relaxed, in love. And there, watching them from the bus stop, disguised among the people waiting for public transport, I knew the time had come to end this farce. I went back to the house and spent the whole morning preparing for what I was going to do. I showered, put on my best dress, fixed my hair, and even put on a little lipstick that I use for special occasions. If I was going to confront the biggest liars in the world, I was going to do it looking like a respectable and dignified lady. I also prepared the house. I arranged all my evidence on the living room table, organized and ready to show. I put out the photos of them together, the printed messages, the hospital documents, my notebook with all the notes I had made for months. Everything was there, arranged as if for a trial. They arrived around 3 inches the afternoon, laughing and chatting. They entered the house with their usual ease, as if they were the masters of the situation. Sophia was carrying Olivia in her arms, and Robert was carrying a bag with new toys they had bought for the baby. "Elena," Robert said, "how was your morning?" Sophia and I took the baby to the park. She really enjoyed seeing the ducks in the pond. "That's nice," I replied with a smile I had practiced for hours. "Why don't you sit here in the living room? I have something very important to show you." They sat on the sofa, with Sophia holding Olivia and Robert beside her. They both looked curious but calm. They had no idea what was about to happen. "What is it, Elena?" Robert asked me. "Is everything all right?" "Everything is perfect," I said. "In fact, it's never been better. You know what? During these 2 years, I've learned many new things. I've learned about parenthood, about love, about family, and above all, I've learned about the truth." I saw Sophia tense up a bit, but Robert still looked calm. "Sophia," I continued, "I want to thank you for everything you've taught me. Thanks to you, I learned that not all people who look weak and needy really are. Some are very intelligent and very good actresses. Now I saw they were both nervous." Sophia hugged Olivia tighter, and Robert shifted uncomfortably in his seat. "What are you talking about, Elena?" Robert asked me with a nervous little smile. "Are you feeling okay?" "I feel perfectly fine," I replied. "In fact, I feel better than I've felt in 2 years. Do you know why? Because I'm finally going to stop living a lie." And that's when I laid out on the coffee table all the evidence I had collected. The photos of them kissing, the messages where they made fun of me, the hospital documents, everything. "Robert Miller," I said, with a voice I didn't recognize as my own, a firm and powerful voice I had never used before. "After 50 years of marriage, I can finally say that I truly know you. You are a liar, a traitor, and a coward." And there at Island, the woman they thought was a fool has become their judge, and her living room has become their courtroom. The power in this house has just shifted, completely and forever. The two of them were speechless, staring at the papers on the table as if they were poisonous snakes. "And you, Sophia," I continued, "or whatever your real name is, because I'm sure that's not your real name either. You're a shameless woman who took advantage of a woman's kindness to live for free for 2 years. Sophia began to cry, but these were no longer the timid tears of the sick cousin. Now she was crying like a woman who knew she had been discovered. "Elena," Robert tried to speak. "Let me explain." "No," I shouted with a force that surprised me. "For 50 years I let you explain things. For 50 years I believed your lies. For 2 years I cared for your mistress, believing she was your cousin. For 2 years I raised your daughter as if she were my granddaughter. I don't want any more explanations. I want you to get out of my house immediately." After that initial confrontation, for a moment there was such a heavy silence in the living room that even Olivia stopped making little noises. Robert and Sophia remained there, speechless, looking at all the evidence of their lie spread across my coffee table as if it were the scene of a crime. And in a way, it was. It was the crime scene of 50 years of marriage and 2 years of my life stolen. But I wasn't finished. What I had just done was only the first step of something much larger that I had been planning for weeks. It wasn't enough to confront them. I wanted complete justice, and that meant that everyone who knew us would know exactly what kind of people they were. "Get out," I repeated, but this time in a calmer tone. "You have until tomorrow to get all your things out of my house. But before you go, you're going to listen to what's going to happen now." Robert tried to stand up, but I raised my hand to stop him. "Sit down," I ordered. "I haven't finished speaking yet." I sat across from them in my favorite chair, the one I had used for years to watch my soap operas in the afternoons. But now I felt like the protagonist of my own drama. And for the first time in my life, I was going to be the one to control the end of the story. For 2 years, you thought Elena Miller was a foolish old woman, right? A naive woman who could take care of your baby, wash your clothes, cook your meals, and maintain your lie without ever suspecting anything. Well, it turns out this foolish old woman is much smarter than you thought. I showed them my notebook with all the entries. I showed them the copies of the photos, the printed messages, everything organized by date. "I've been investigating you for months. I know exactly when your relationship started. I know how much money Robert has spent on you, Sophia. I know you opened a secret bank account, Robert. I know you've been lying about your work hours to see her. I know everything." I saw them look at each other, realizing that the woman they had been deceiving had turned out to be much more cunning than they imagined. "But what you don't know," I continued, "is what's going to happen now. And that, my dear liars, is what I am going to decide." Over the next 2 hours, I explained my plan to them in detail. It wasn't just about kicking them out of the house. It was going to be a complete lesson for them and for the whole community about the consequences of betraying a good woman's trust. First, I told them that the next day, Sunday, we were going to go to 7 a.m. Mass together, as we had done for years. But this time, after Mass, I was going to ask Father Michael to allow us to speak to the entire community. And there, in front of all our neighbors, acquaintances, and friends, I was going to tell them the whole truth about what had happened in our house for the last 2 years. "Are you crazy?" Robert shouted at me. "You're not going to make a fool of yourself like that." "You're the ones who made fools of yourselves," I replied calmly. "I'm just going to tell the truth. Or are you afraid of people knowing what kind of people you really are?" Second, I explained that I was going to talk to Mrs. Margaret, Robert's mother, to tell her everything that had happened. For 2 years, he had been giving her money that he said was from him. Money that was actually intended to support his mistress and their daughter. The poor woman had a right to know the truth about her son. Third, I was going to go to my friend Patricia and all the ladies at the market where I bought the ingredients for my pies. For over 40 years, those women had seen me work, strive, be a dedicated wife. They deserved to know how my husband had repaid all that dedication. Fourth, and this was what scared them the most, I told them I was going to go to the construction site where Robert worked to talk to his co-workers. I wanted all the men who knew him to know that he was not the hard-working and honest man he appeared to be, but a liar who had deceived his wife for years. "Elena, please," Sophia begged me, crying with the baby in her arms. "Think about Olivia. She's an innocent baby. It's not her fault what we did." That was the first time in 2 years that Sophia admitted she had done something wrong, but it was too late for pleading. "You're right," I said. "Olivia is innocent, but I was also innocent when you decided to turn my life into a lie. The difference is that Olivia will grow up and forget all this. I was 69 years old at the time, and I will never be able to get back the 2 years you stole from me." But that's when I revealed the most clever part of my plan, the part I had been working on in secret for the last few weeks. I told them that I had been in contact with a lawyer, Mr. Thompson, whose office was near the market where I sold my pies. I had taken all the evidence of the situation to him, and he had explained my rights to me. "Do you know what the lawyer told me?" I asked, my voice steady for the first time in months. He didn't just list laws. He looked at me, a 70-year-old woman with a broken heart, and he gave me back my power. He told me that the law has a name for this kind of pain. It's called fraud. It's called breach of trust. He told me that my kindness was not a weakness for you to exploit, but a foundation upon which my rights were built. He told me that this house, this life I built with my own 2 hands selling pies, was mine to defend. He didn't just give me legal options. He reminded me that I had a voice, and that my voice mattered. I saw Robert's face turn pale when he heard that. "But that's not all," I continued. "He also told me that since Robert acknowledged Olivia as his daughter, even though it's outside of marriage, I have the right to demand that all our assets, including this house, be divided to ensure the baby's maintenance." The irony of the situation was perfect. They had used my kindness to get a place to live and raise their daughter. But now, that same kindness they had exploited was going to become the legal reason for me to take away everything they had gained with their lie. However, I told them, I am not a vengeful person, I am a just woman, so I am going to give you a choice. I explained my proposal. They could choose between 2 options. The first was for things to follow the legal course, with lawsuits, trials, and all the publicity that would entail. The second was for them to accept my conditions for an amicable separation. My conditions were as follows. First, Robert had to sign before a notary that he renounced any right to the house and to all the assets we had acquired during the marriage. Second, he had to pay me financial compensation for the expenses I had incurred during the 2 years caring for his mistress and their daughter. Third, both he and Sophia had to write a public letter, which I was going to circulate in the neighborhood, acknowledging what they had done and apologizing to me. And if we accept those conditions? Robert asked me, "If you accept them?" I said, "I promise not to make a public scandal in the church, but you will still have to leave my house, and I will still tell the truth to the people close to us. The difference is that it will be in a more discreet way, without so much drama. This is no longer about simple revenge. This is a masterclass in justice. Elena isn't just acting from pain. She's acting from a place of power and intelligence, ensuring they can't escape the consequences. But will they accept her terms? Let's find out." For the next 3 hours, they tried to negotiate with me. Robert promised me he would change, that he would send Sophia back to Tucson, that we could stay together as if nothing had happened. Sophia begged me to think about all the good times we had had together, how I had come to love Olivia. But I had already made my decision weeks ago. There was no turning back. 50 years of marriage could not be repaired with promises and pleas. Trust, once broken in that way, could never be rebuilt. That night, while they were packing their things in the back room, I dedicated myself to preparing everything for the next day. I organized all the documents I needed. I prepared copies of the evidence to show to the people I was going to talk to, and I wrote a detailed list of all the steps I had to follow. Also that night, for the first time in 2 years, I felt truly at peace. I no longer had to pretend to be happy. I no longer had to pretend that I didn't see the obvious signs that something was wrong. I no longer had to care for my husband's mistress, believing I was doing a charitable act. It was strange, but I felt freer and stronger than I had felt in decades. But now, for the first time in my life, I was going to live for myself, for my dignity, for my justice. Around 11 at night, there was a knock on my bedroom door. It was Sophia, with a sleeping Olivia in her arms. "Mrs. Miller," she said in a broken voice, Can I talk to you for a few minutes?" I let her in, and she sat in the chair I have next to the window. "I want you to know," she said, "that during these 2 years, I really came to love you. At first, everything was fake, as you already know. But then, seeing how you took care of me, how you took care of Olivia, how good you were to me without expecting anything in return, I began to feel real guilt and affection. And why did you never tell me the truth if you felt so much affection?" I asked. "Because I was afraid," she confessed, "afraid of losing Robert, afraid of being left alone with the baby, afraid of having nowhere to go. But also because every day that passed, it was harder to confess that everything had been a lie." I remained silent, listening to her cry softly so as not to wake Olivia. "Can I ask you something?" she said after a while. "Tell me, how did you know I wasn't really his cousin? What made you suspect?" I told her about the conversation I had overheard one night, about how I had started to notice the resemblance between Olivia and Robert, about all the small details that didn't fit the story they had told me. "But above all," I said, "it was the way Robert behaved with me. After 50 years of marriage, I knew my husband very well. I knew when he was worried, when he was happy, when he was lying. And during these 2 years, he was acting in a way that was not natural. He was too attentive to me, too considerate, as if he were compensating for something." Sophia nodded. "You're right," she said. "He always said he felt guilty for deceiving you, especially because you were so good to us. But he said it was too late to confess the truth, that it would be worse for everyone if you found out." "And what do you think?" I asked. "Do you think it would have been worse if you had told me the truth from the beginning?" She thought for a few minutes, gently rocking Olivia. "I don't know," she finally said. "Maybe you would have kicked us out immediately, and we would have had to find another solution. But it's also true that you would have saved yourself 2 years of being deceived. I don't know what would have been better." That conversation helped me confirm something I had been thinking for weeks. Sophia was not a bad person by nature. She was a young, scared woman who had made wrong decisions to solve her problems. But that didn't justify what she had done, and it didn't change the fact that she had to face the consequences of her actions. After she left, I stayed up late, finalizing the details of my plan for the next day. I had decided that the first stop would be Mrs. Margaret's house, Robert's mother. She was 95 years old and deserved to know the truth about her son before anyone else. Then I would go talk to Father Michael at the church, not to make the public scene I had threatened them with, but to ask for his spiritual advice on how to handle the situation. I had also decided that I was going to start spreading the story selectively, telling it first to the people who mattered most to me and who had supported me the most over the years. My friend Patricia, the ladies at the market with whom I had worked for so long, my brother David, my sisters in Denver. But above all, I had decided that I was going to use this experience to help other women who might be going through similar situations. In recent weeks, reflecting on everything that had happened, I had realized that there were probably other ladies my age who were being deceived or mistreated and who didn't know how to defend themselves. I wanted to turn my story into a lesson for all of us, the mature women who sometimes think it's too late to change our lives or to defend ourselves from abuse. I wanted to show that at 69, or at any age, a woman can find the strength to rebuild her life and regain her dignity. That night, I also called my sister Carol in Denver to tell her everything that was happening. It had been months since I had spoken with her, and I needed my family's support for what was to come. "Oh, Elena," she shouted over the phone when I told her the whole story. "I can't believe that scoundrel did that to you. Do you want me to come to Phoenix to be with you?" "It's not necessary," I said, "but I do need you to know that your sister is no longer the same foolish woman she used to be. Now I am a woman who respects herself." "You've always been a strong woman, Elena," Carol told me. "The thing is, you used to use that strength to serve others. Now you're going to use it to serve yourself." Her words gave me the final push I needed to be completely sure of my decisions. The next day, a new stage of my life was going to begin, and I wanted to be prepared for whatever came. Sunday dawned with a bright sun, which I took as a sign that the day would go as I had planned. I got up at 5 inches the morning, as I had always done for 45 years. But this time, I didn't get up to prepare pies to sell. I got up to prepare for the most important day of my adult life. I showered calmly, put on my best dress, the navy blue one I wear for weddings and baptisms. I fixed my hair carefully and even put on the gold earrings my mother had left me. I wanted to look like a respectable and dignified lady for everything I had to do that day. When I came out of my room, I found Robert and Sophia having a silent breakfast in the kitchen, with all their suitcases already packed by the door. Olivia was in her stroller, also ready to go. "Good morning," I said politely, as if it were any other Sunday. "Good morning," they replied, without daring to look me in the eye. "Are you ready to go?" I asked them. "Yes," Robert answered. "I've packed all our things, and here are the house keys and the papers you asked me to sign." He handed me an envelope with documents. I reviewed them quickly and saw that he had indeed signed everything I had asked for: the waiver of rights to the house, the commitment to pay me financial compensation in monthly installments, and the letters of apology that they were to deliver to the people I indicated. "Very well," I said. "And have you decided where you're going?" "Sophia has an aunt in Tucson who will take us in while we find a place of our own," Robert answered. It seemed ironic to me that after everything, he would end up in Tucson, from where he had supposedly come fleeing. "Perfect," I said. "Then you can leave whenever you like. I have several things to do today, and I'd prefer you not be here when I get back." Sophia approached me with Olivia in her arms. "Mrs. Miller," she said, "do you want to say goodbye to Olivia? For 2 years, you were like her grandmother." I looked at the baby, who smiled at me with that innocent smile of small children. For a moment, I felt a pang in my heart because it was true that I had come to love her very much. But I also knew that saying goodbye to her was necessary to be able to completely close this chapter of my life. "May you have a very beautiful life, Olivia," I said, stroking her cheek, "and may you learn to be an honest and brave woman when you grow up." Then I turned to Sophia. "And you?" I said. "I hope this experience teaches you that lying is never the way to solve problems. May you find an honest way to live your life and raise your daughter." Finally, I looked at Robert. "And you?" I said. "I hope you one day understand the harm you did to me. You not only cheated on me with another woman, you took 2 years of my life, you stole my trust, and you forced me to live a lie every day. That is not forgiven, but it is also not forgotten." I left the house without looking back. I had a very busy schedule that day and didn't want to waste time on dramatic farewells. My first stop was the home of Mrs. Margaret, Robert's mother. She lives about 10 blocks from my house, in a small but very well-kept cottage. I arrived around 8 inches the morning and found her watering her plants in the front yard. "Elena," she said with a smile when she saw me arrive, "what a surprise to see you here so early. How are you, my dear?" "Good morning, Mrs. Margaret," I said. "Can we talk for a little while? I have something very important to tell you." She sat with me on the chair she has on her porch, and for the next half hour I told her the whole story, from the day Robert came with the news of his sick cousin to the confrontation the day before. "Mrs. Margaret is a strong woman, one of those who have lived through many difficult things, but I had never seen her cry like she cried that day. Oh, Elena," she said between tears. "I was so proud of my son, thinking he was a good and hard-working man. How could he do that to you? How could he deceive you in such a cruel way?" "Don't feel bad, Mrs. Margaret," I said. "You are not to blame for the decisions your son made, and you don't have to feel ashamed either. Children sometimes take paths their parents never taught them. "What are you going to do now?" she asked me. "I'm going to start a new life," I answered. "At 69, I'm going to learn to live for myself." Mrs. Margaret hugged me very tightly when I was leaving. "You are a very brave woman, Elena," she said, "and you have my support in whatever you decide to do." My son lost the best woman in the world for being a fool. My second stop was the church. Father Michael was preparing for the 9 o'clock Mass, but when I told him I needed to speak with him about a very urgent matter, he received me in the sacristy. I told him the whole story in a summarized way and asked for his advice on how to handle the situation from a Christian point of view. "My child," Father Michael told me, "what they did to you was a grave offense against marriage and against trust. You have every right to feel hurt and to take the necessary measures to protect your dignity." "But is it okay for me to expose them publicly?" I asked. "Wouldn't it be better to forgive and forget?" "Forgiveness is important," he replied. "But forgiveness does not mean that you have to allow them to continue abusing you. You can forgive in your heart to free yourself from resentment, but you can also make practical decisions to protect yourself and to ensure that this does not happen again." His words gave me great peace. They confirmed that what I was doing was just and necessary. My third stop was my friend Patricia's house. She lives near the market, and I knew that at that hour she would be getting ready to do her Sunday shopping. Patricia and I have been friends for over 20 years. She knows my marriage to Robert very well and has always been there to support me in difficult times. When I told her the whole story, she became furious. "That scoundrel!" she shouted. "And I always thought he was a good man. Elena, why didn't you tell me anything sooner? I would have investigated that supposed cousin from day one." "I didn't suspect anything until recently," I explained. "And when I started to suspect, I wanted to be sure before saying anything." "And what are you going to do now?" she asked me. "I'm going to start over," I said. "I'm going to keep selling my pies, I'm going to take care of my house, and I'm going to learn to be happy on my own." "You won't be alone," Patricia assured me. "You have friends who love you, and we will support you in everything." That afternoon, after lunch, I went to the market where I buy my ingredients for the pies. I wanted to talk to Mrs. Garcia, the lady who sells me the chilies, and to Mr. Johnson, who sells me the meat. These people have known me for decades, and I knew the news would spread quickly throughout the market. As expected, by 5 inches the afternoon, everyone in the market knew the story, and the reaction was exactly what I had expected. Complete support for me and total repudiation of Robert and Sophia. "Mrs. Miller," Mrs. Garcia told me, "you have always been a hard-working and honest woman. You don't deserve to have been treated like this. And if you need anything," Mr. Johnson told me, "we are here to support you. You have been a loyal customer for many years, and we are loyal to you." But the most important stop of the day was my last stop, the construction site where Robert worked. I arrived around 6 inches the evening when I knew the workers would be finishing their day. I looked for Frank, the foreman of the site, who had known Robert for several years. I asked him to gather all of Robert's co-workers because I had something important to tell them. About 15 men gathered, most of them married, all working class like us. I told them the complete story with all the details and showed them some of the evidence I had collected. The reaction was immediate and forceful. "What a son of a bitch!" one of them shouted, and we respected him as a family man. "Mrs. Miller," Frank told me, "you can be sure that Robert Miller is no longer welcome on any site where I am the foreman, and I will make sure that all the builders in Phoenix know what kind of man he island. I don't want you to persecute him or harm him," I clarified. "I just want you to know the truth about him so that no other woman goes through what I went through." "Don't worry," Frank assured me. "We are men of work, not violence, but we will make sure that everyone knows that Robert Miller is not a trustworthy man." That night I returned home completely exhausted, but also completely satisfied. I had done everything I had set out to do. I had confronted the liars, I had spread the truth among the important people in my life, and I had begun the process of reclaiming my dignity and self-respect. When I got home, I found a note from Robert on the kitchen table. It said, "Elena, I hope you can forgive me one day. I never wanted to hurt you like this. I will deposit the money we agreed upon on the 15th of each month. Robert." I read the note only once and threw it in the trash. I was no longer interested in late apologies or empty promises. What interested me was the future I was beginning to build. That night, for the first time in 50 years, I went to bed alone in my marital bed. And for the first time in 2 years, I slept peacefully and calmly. The first few days after Robert and Sophia left were very strange for me. For 2 years, I had gotten used to having a house full of people, with the noise of the baby, the conversations at meals, the constant movement of a family. Suddenly, my house felt huge and very quiet, but it also felt like mine again. That silence. It was frightening at first, but then I realized it was the silence of freedom, the silence of truth. For the first time in 2 years, I didn't have to listen to lies or pretend anymore. This house was finally, truly mine, and mine alone. For the first time in a long time, I could walk through my house without encountering evidence of the lie I had been living. There were no baby clothes hanging on the line, no bottles in the kitchen, no smell of Sophia's perfume in the bathroom. The first Monday after they left, I got up at 5 inches the morning, as always, but instead of preparing to make pies, I sat in the kitchen drinking coffee and planning what I was going to do with my new life. At 69 years old, I owned my own home, had a pie business that had fed me for 45 years, and for the first time in my adult life, I didn't have to take care of anyone but myself. It was a completely new situation for me, and I had to learn to navigate it. During that first week, I dedicated myself to completely cleaning the house. I washed all the curtains, cleaned all the furniture, changed the sheets on all the beds. I wanted to remove any trace of their presence in my home. It was more than just cleaning. It was a ritual of reclaiming my soul. With every baby cloth I folded and packed away, I was packing away the illusion of the grandmother I thought I was. When I stripped the sheets from their bed, it felt like stripping away the final layer of their deceit from my life. The silence I had dreaded was no longer empty. It was filled with possibility. It was the sound of my own thoughts, my own future, my own life, waiting to be lived on my terms. I wasn't just cleaning a house. I was cleansing a life. I also took out all the things from the room where Sophia and Olivia had slept and decided to turn it into something different. I still didn't know what, but I knew I wanted to give it a new purpose. The support of my community during those first weeks was incredible. Every morning, when I went out to sell my pies, people would come up to greet me, to ask me how I was, to assure me of their support. The ladies at the market would invite me to lunch. My regular customers bought more pies than they needed, and even people I didn't know well would come up to offer words of encouragement. Mrs. Miller, a lady who bought pies from me on Fridays, told me, "You are an example for all of us married women. You showed that it's never too late to stand up for yourself." My friend Patricia became my constant companion during those weeks. She would come to visit me every afternoon, accompany me on my shopping trips, and even invite me to her house for dinner and conversation. One afternoon, while we were having coffee in my kitchen, she asked me a question that changed my perspective on the whole situation. "Elena," she said, "do you regret discovering the truth?" I thought for a moment before answering. "You know what, Patricia?" I finally said. At first, I thought it would have been better to continue living in deceit, because at least I was happy taking care of Olivia and believing I had a bigger family. But now I realized that happiness was false. It was like living in a beautiful dream, but at the end of the day, dreams aren't real. "And what does it feel like to live in reality?" she asked me. "It hurts more at first," I replied, "but it's also more liberating. Now everything I have is really mine. My house is mine, my time is mine, my decisions are mine, and no one is lying to me." During the second week after they left, I started to notice changes in myself that I hadn't expected. I was waking up later, around 6, instead of 5. It wasn't because I was lazy, but because I no longer had the pressure of preparing food for 3 adults and a baby. I could take my time to get ready, to drink my coffee calmly, to plan my day without rushing. I also started to change my work routine. For 45 years, I had made pies every day of the week, but now I decided that Sundays would be my complete days of rest. On Sundays, I would dedicate myself, to reading, to fixing up my house, to visiting my friends, or simply to doing nothing if I felt like it. The first Sunday I implemented this new routine, I felt a little guilty. For decades, I had believed that a working woman couldn't afford to rest completely, but then I realized that this feeling of guilt was part of the mentality that had made me vulnerable to Robert's deceit. I had always put the needs of others before my own, and that had made it very easy for them to take advantage of me. One afternoon, while I was reorganizing the room that had belonged to Sophia and Olivia, I found something they had left behind. A small photo album of Olivia that I myself had started to make during her first months of life. There were photos of the newborn baby, of her first smiles, of the moments when I bathed and fed her. For a moment, I sat on the bed looking at those photos and felt a mixture of nostalgia and sadness. Despite everything that had happened, I couldn't deny that I had genuinely loved that baby. The feelings I had had during those months had been real, even if the situation had been false, but I also realized something important. The fact that they had abused my love for Olivia did not mean that that love had been useless or wrong. During those months, I had experienced the joy of caring for a baby, something I had never been able to do as a biological mother, that had filled a void in my heart that had existed for decades. The deceit couldn't take those feelings or those experiences away from me. They couldn't erase the satisfaction I had felt when Olivia calmed down in my arms, or the excitement of seeing her smile for the first time, or the tenderness of rocking her to sleep. Those moments had been mine, regardless of the lies that surrounded them. This reflection led me to make an important decision about what to do with that room. Instead of turning it into a storage room or a guest room, I decided to turn it into a space for myself. It was going to be my sewing workshop, my reading place, my personal refuge. This is so much more than just redecorating a room. It's about reclaiming a piece of her soul. She is physically erasing the space the lie occupied and transforming it into a place of creativity and peace. This is one of the first, most powerful steps in building her new life, a life that is entirely her own. Over the next few weeks, I dedicated myself to furnishing that room according to my tastes and needs. I bought a sewing machine that I had wanted for years, but had never been able to justify because there were always other family priorities. I put in a small bookshelf where I started to collect novels and cookbooks. I bought a comfortable chair where I could sit and sew, or read in the afternoons. Transforming that space was very therapeutic for me. It was like physically reclaiming the territory that had been invaded by the lie and turning it into something that was completely mine. The biggest change came a month after they left, when I decided to do something I had never done in 50 years of marriage. I took a vacation alone. My sister Carol had been inviting me to visit her in Denver ever since she found out about the whole situation, but I had always found excuses not to go. I had to sell pies. I couldn't leave the house alone. I didn't have money for the trip. But one Tuesday morning, after selling my pies, I went straight to the Greyhound bus station and bought a ticket to Denver for the following Friday. That week-long vacation in Denver was a revelation for me. Carol treated me like a queen. She took me to see places in the city I had never visited. We went to restaurants, to the movies, shopping, But the most important thing was that during that week, I was able to talk at length with someone who had known me since I was a child, who could help me process everything that had happened. Elena, Carol told me one night while we were having tea in her kitchen, I always thought you were too good for Robert, but I never said anything because it seemed like you were happy with him. You really never liked him? I asked. It's not that I didn't like him, she explained. It's just that it always seemed to me that he received much more from you than he gave in return. You were always working, taking care of him, serving him, and he behaved as if all of that was his natural right. Her words made me reflect on patterns in my marriage that I had never questioned before. It was true that for 50 years I had been the one who adapted, the one who gave in, the one who sought family harmony at the expense of my own needs and desires. But now it's different, Carol continued. Now I see you more sure of yourself, more determined. It's like you've woken up from a very long dream. When I returned to Phoenix after that week, I felt like a new person. I had more energy, more optimism, and above all, more clarity about what I wanted to do with the rest of my life. One of the first things I did was look for Mr. Thompson, the lawyer, to thank him for his help and to ask him about the divorce proceedings. 2 months had passed since Robert had left, and I wanted to legally formalize the end of our marriage. Mrs. Miller, the lawyer said, I'm very glad to see you looking so well. It's clear that this experience, although painful, has also made you much stronger. Yes, I replied. I feel as if I have recovered a part of myself that I had lost many years ago. The divorce process turned out to be simpler than I had thought. Since Robert had signed all the documents waiving his rights to our assets, and there were no issues of child custody or domestic violence, everything was resolved relatively quickly. While we waited for the legal proceedings to be completed, I continued to rebuild my life day by day. I returned to my routine of making pies, but now with a completely different perspective. I no longer made them just to earn money and support a family. I made them because I liked to cook, because it was a job I knew well, and because it gave me financial independence. I also started to explore other activities I had always wanted to do but never had time for. I signed up for an embroidery class at the community center in my neighborhood. I started going to the public library on Saturday afternoons to read and to participate in a book club for ladies my age. On Sundays, I started visiting museums and parks in the city, places I had never known despite having lived in Phoenix my whole life. Each new activity was like discovering a facet of my personality that had been dormant for decades. I discovered that I really liked reading romance and historical novels. I discovered that I had a talent for embroidery. I discovered that I really enjoyed conversations with other women my age, who were also rediscovering who they were after years of dedicating themselves exclusively to their families. But the most important discovery was that I liked my own company. For 69 years, I had believed that I always needed to be taking care of someone or serving someone to feel useful and valuable. Now I was learning that I could be useful and valuable by taking care of and serving myself. One afternoon, 3 months after Robert and Sophia left, I was in my new sewing room, embroidering some napkins, when I suddenly realized something that filled me with a deep sense of peace. I was completely happy. It wasn't a euphoric or dramatic happiness. It was a calm and solid happiness based on the certainty that I was living an authentic life, without lies, without compromises that made me betray my own dignity. That night, I wrote in a new notebook I had bought to record my thoughts during this new stage of my life. Today I realized that Robert's betrayal, although it was the most painful thing that has ever happened to me, was also the greatest gift he could have given me. It forced me to discover who I really am when I'm not defined by my relationship with other people. And it turns out, I really like the woman I am. The real test of my new life came 6 months after Robert and Sophia left. I found out from my friend Patricia that they had returned to Phoenix. They had been living in Tucson, but according to rumors, things hadn't gone well for them there. Robert hadn't been able to find stable work, and Sophia had had health problems after the birth that required specialized medical attention not available in the town where they were living. "And do you know where they're living now?" Patricia asked me when she came to give me the news. "No, and I'm not interested in knowing," I answered honestly. "That part of my life is already closed." But life, as always, had its own plans. 2 weeks after finding out they had returned, I ran into them at the market where I buy my ingredients for the pies. I was picking out chilies with Mrs. Garcia when I saw them walking down the main aisle. Robert was pushing a stroller where Olivia, who was now 8 months old, was sitting, looking bigger and prettier. Sophia was walking beside him, but I could tell she was thinner and paler than when she had left my house. For a moment, the three of us just stared at each other, not knowing what to do. I felt a knot in my stomach, not of nostalgia or sadness, but of nerves. It was the first time I had seen them since the day of the confrontation, and I didn't know how I was going to react. But after a few seconds, I realized something profound. Looking at him, I no longer saw the monster who had shattered my world, nor the husband of 50 years. I saw a stranger, a ghost from a life that was no longer mine. The fire of anger, the sharp glass of pain, they had all burned away. What remained was not indifference, but a deep, quiet certainty. A certainty in my own worth, a peace that was mine alone, which he had not given me and could no longer take away. Robert approached me with an expression of nervousness and guilt. "Elena," he said in a low voice, "can we talk for a moment?" "Of course," I replied, but without moving from where I was standing. "What do you need?" "I wanted to apologize to you again, and I wanted you to know that we've had a lot of problems since we left. Maybe what happened was a sign that I had made some very wrong decisions." I remained silent, waiting to see what else he had to say. Do you think we could try to fix things?" he asked. "These past few months, I've realized that with you, I had a good, stable life. Sophia and I have had a lot of problems, a lot of fights. Maybe we made a very big mistake." His words didn't surprise me as much as my own reaction to them. For 50 years, if Robert had told me he wanted to get back with me after any problem, I would have accepted immediately. But now, hearing him ask me to forgive him and for us to get back together, the only thing I felt was a kind of pity for him. "Robert," I said with a calm that surprised me, "I am no longer the same woman I was 6 months ago. The Elena who took care of your mistress for 2 years, believing she was your cousin, no longer exists. The new Elena doesn't need a man who only respects her when his other options don't work out. But Elena, we have 50 years of marriage." He insisted. "That has to count for something." "Yes, it counts for something," I replied. "It counts as a very important lesson about what I don't want in my life. Robert, for those 50 years I thought I was your partner, but in reality, I was your servant. A servant who worked for free, who didn't ask questions, and who was always available for whatever you needed. This is the final test, and Elena has passed with flying colors. It's not about winning an argument anymore. It's about knowing, with absolute certainty, that her peace is more valuable than his apologies. Her journey of rediscovery is now truly complete." I saw that Sophia had approached and was listening to our conversation with tears in her eyes. "And what are you going to do now?" Robert asked me. "I'm going to continue living my life," I said. "A life where I don't have to take care of anyone but myself, where I don't have to pretend that I'm happy when I'm not, and where I don't have to live with fear that they are lying to me." I turned to Sophia, who was still crying silently. "And you, Sophia, I hope you learn to solve your problems honestly, without deceiving good people who only want to help you." I looked one last time at Olivia, who was looking at me from her stroller with those big, innocent eyes. "And I hope that when Olivia grows up, you teach her to be an honest and brave woman, who knows how to respect herself and respect others." I turned around and finished buying my chilies as if nothing had happened, but inside I felt triumphant. Not because I had said hurtful things to them, but because I had managed to maintain my dignity and my inner peace even in such a difficult situation. When I got home that afternoon, I sat in my sewing room and reflected on what had happened. I realized that this encounter had been the final test of my transformation. The old Elena would have gone back to Robert, would have justified his behavior, would have accepted his apologies, and would have returned to living a life that was not authentic. But the new Elena had been able to say no. She had been able to prioritize her own well-being over social expectations of forgiveness and reconciliation. She had been able to recognize that some betrayals are so deep that it is better to build something new than to try to repair what is irreparably broken. In the days following that encounter, several people asked me if I hadn't felt sorry for Robert, seeing him so repentant, if I hadn't been tempted by the possibility of having a family again. My answer was always the same. Pity and temptation were emotions that belonged to my previous life. In my new life, decisions were based on self-respect and authenticity, not on pity or fear of loneliness. A year after the separation, when I already had the signed divorce papers and everything legally settled, I decided to do something that would completely symbolize my new life. I completely changed the decoration of my house. For 50 years, I had lived surrounded by the furniture and colors that Robert and I had chosen together. Everything in the house held memories of our shared life. And although not all of them were bad memories, I wanted to create a space that was completely mine. I painted the walls in colors that I had always liked but had never used because Robert said they were too feminine or too flashy. I bought new furniture, not very expensive, but chosen according to my own tastes. I changed the curtains, the pictures, even the plates and glasses. The result was a house that felt completely different, but also felt completely mine. Every object had been chosen by me. Every color reflected my personality. Every corner was arranged according to my needs and preferences. The inauguration of my renovated house was a small party I organized for my closest friends. My friend Patricia, the ladies from the embroidery club, my dearest neighbors, and even my sisters Carol and Judith came from Denver to join me. "Elena," Carol said to me that night as we toasted with punch in my renovated living room, "I have never seen you look as radiant as you do now." "That's because I've never been so comfortable with myself," I replied. "For almost 70 years, I lived trying to be the woman others wanted me to be. Now, I am finally the woman I want to be." That night, after my guests had left, I stayed alone in my new house, having a glass of wine and feeling a deep satisfaction. It wasn't the satisfaction of having avenged a betrayal or of having punished someone who had hurt me. It was the satisfaction of having rescued my own life, of having given myself the opportunity to discover who I really was when I wasn't defined by my relationship with other people. Over the following months, my new life consolidated naturally. My pie business prospered because now I could dedicate all my attention and creativity to it. I even developed some new recipes that became very popular with my customers. My social circle expanded with women who, like me, had decided to live authentic and independent lives. I also started to participate in support groups for women who had gone through difficult divorces or marital betrayals. My story became a source of inspiration for ladies my age who felt too old or too scared to change their lives. Mrs. Miller, a 65-year-old woman who had discovered that her husband had another family, told me, "If you could remake your life at 69, I can do it at 65. Becoming an example for other women gave me a purpose I had never had before. Not only was I living my own authentic life, but I was helping other women find the courage to live theirs. 2 years after the separation, I received a call I wasn't expecting. It was Sophia, Mrs. Miller, she said in a very timid voice. "I know you may not want to talk to me, but I need to tell you something important." "Tell me," I replied, curious but without committing to anything. Robert and I separated 3 months ago, she told me. The problems we had when we returned to Phoenix were never resolved, and in the end, we realized that our relationship was based more on need than on true love. I remained silent, waiting for her to get to the point of her call. I want to ask for your forgiveness again, she continued. But I also want to thank you for something. During these 2 years, seeing how you handled the whole situation, how you respected yourself, and how you built a new life, I learned what it means to be a strong woman, and that helped me make the decision to leave a relationship that was no longer right for me. Isn't it incredible how our actions can have consequences we never expect? Elena's fight for her own dignity became a silent lesson in strength for the very woman who betrayed her. It's a powerful reminder that living authentically doesn't just change our own lives, it can ripple out and change others in the most unexpected ways. Her words surprised me. I had never thought that my example could have influenced Sophia's decisions. "And how are you now?" I asked. "I'm working in a clothing store. I have a small apartment for Olivia and me, and I'm learning to be independent. It's difficult, but it's honest. For the first time in my life, I'm supporting my daughter with my own work, without lying to anyone or taking advantage of anyone." I was glad to hear that she had found an honest way to live, but it also confirmed something I had suspected for a long time. The people who had betrayed me had been as lost as I was, just in different ways. "I'm glad to know you're doing well," I said sincerely. "And I hope Olivia grows up seeing a hardworking and honest mom." After that conversation, I was left thinking about how betrayals and pains can sometimes become opportunities for growth for all the people involved. I had grown by discovering my own strength and independence. Sophia had grown by learning to live honestly, and even Robert, in his own way, probably had learned something about the consequences of his actions. This didn't mean that I had forgiven them completely or that I considered what they did to be justified, but it did mean that I could see the whole experience as something that, in the end, had enriched my life more than it had impoverished it. Now that just over 2 years have passed since that day I discovered the truth about Robert and Sophia, I can tell you with absolute certainty that this experience, despite all the pain it caused me, became the greatest blessing of my life. I know it sounds strange to say that a betrayal was a blessing, but I'm going to explain why I say it. For 69 years of my life, I was a woman who lived to serve others. I was the daughter who took care of her parents, the wife who attended to her husband, the woman who was always available to help anyone in need. I'm not saying that was wrong, because serving others with love is also a valid way to live. But the problem was that I had never learned to serve myself, to respect myself, to live for myself. Robert's betrayal forced me to do something I never would have done on my own, put my own needs first. It forced me to ask myself what I wanted, what I needed, what made me happy, regardless of what others expected of me. And when I started asking myself those questions and looking for those answers, I discovered a woman who had been dormant for decades. I discovered that I had my own interests, my own talents, my own dreams. I discovered that I could be happy on my own, that I could make intelligent decisions, that I could be strong when the situation required it. In these past couple of years, my life has completely transformed. My pie business is now more prosperous than ever because I can dedicate all my creativity and my energy to it. I have expanded my offerings, including sweet pies with new flavors and even vegetarian pies for customers who ask for them. I have a loyal clientele that comes to me not only for the quality of my food, but because they know I am a hardworking and honest woman. My house has become a perfect refuge for me. Every corner reflects my personal tastes, and I have spaces dedicated to all my favorite activities. My sewing room is where I spend my afternoons embroidering and reading. My kitchen is organized exactly how I like it for efficient cooking. My small garden is full of plants that I chose and that I care for with my own hands. But the most important thing is that I have developed a network of genuine friendships with women who value me for who I am, not for what I can do for them. My embroidery club became a support group where we share our life experiences and help each other grow. With my friend Patricia, I have a deeper friendship than ever, because now our conversations are between two independent women who respect each other. I have also started to travel, something I had never done during my marriage. I have visited my sisters in Denver several times. I have gone to see other places in the country, and I even took a group trip with the ladies from my club to Guadalajara to see the Orozco murals. Each trip is a new adventure, an opportunity to discover things about the world and about myself. As for my feelings, I can honestly tell you that I no longer feel resentment towards Robert or Sophia. It's not that I have forgiven them dramatically, or that I think what they did was right. It's just that they no longer occupy emotional space in my life. They are part of my past, and that past no longer defines my present or my future. Every now and then, I run into one of them on the street or at the market. I greet them politely, ask about Olivia if it comes up, and go on with my day. There is no drama, no pain, no anger, only a tranquility that comes from knowing that I am a complete woman on my own. Regarding the possibility of finding a new partner, it's something my friends ask me about from time to time. My answer is always the same. If one day someone appears who adds genuine value to my life, who respects me completely, and who accompanies me without trying to change me, I will consider that possibility. But I will never again be in a relationship out of fear of loneliness or social pressure. My current life is so rich and satisfying that any man would have to be truly extraordinary to improve what I already have. One of the most gratifying things about this new chapter has been becoming an example and inspiration for other women my age who are going through similar situations. I receive phone calls from ladies who tell me about their marital problems, who ask for my advice on how to handle betrayals or abandonment, who want to know how to find the courage to change their lives. My message to all of them is always the same. It's never too late to rescue your life. It doesn't matter if you are 50, 60, 70, or more. As long as you are alive, you have the ability to decide how you want to live. You don't have to settle for an existence that doesn't satisfy you just because you're too old to change or because it's what life has dealt you. I also tell them that change is not easy, and that they will probably have moments of fear, of loneliness, of doubt about their decisions, but that all those feelings are temporary, while the satisfaction of living an authentic life is permanent. To the young women who are listening to me, I want to say something different, but equally important. Learn to value yourselves now. Don't wait until you're 69 like I did to discover that you have the right to be happy on your own. Build relationships based on mutual respect and honesty, not on need or fear. And never, ever completely sacrifice your personal identity to maintain a relationship, no matter how much you love that person. My story is not unique. There are thousands of women all over the country who have gone through similar betrayals, who have discovered lies in their marriages, who have had to rebuild their lives after 50. What makes my story special is not what happened to me, but what I decided to do with what happened to me. Instead of remaining a victim, I decided to become the protagonist of my own life. Instead of becoming bitter, I decided to grow. Instead of closing myself off from the world, I decided to open myself up to new possibilities. And instead of defining myself by the betrayal I experienced, I decided to define myself by the strength I discovered. Now, when I wake up every morning in my quiet and peaceful house, I feel a peace that I never had during my years of marriage. It is the peace of knowing that everything I have is authentic, that no one is lying to me, that no one is abusing my trust. It is the peace of knowing that if someone is with me, it is because they genuinely want to be with me, not because they need something from me. I also feel a strength that I never knew I had. It is the strength of knowing that I can face any problem that comes my way, that I can make difficult decisions when necessary, that I can live according to my own values, regardless of what others think. And above all, I feel a quiet but constant joy. It is not the euphoric joy of special moments, but the solid joy of knowing that I am living the life I truly want to live. If Robert appeared at my door today, telling me that he had made the biggest mistake of his life and begging me to take him back, my answer would be the same as the one I gave him 2 years ago at the market. No, thank you. Not because I'm vengeful or resentful, but because the life I have now is infinitely better than the life I had with him. For 50 years I believed that being a good wife meant constantly sacrificing for my husband, never complaining, always forgiving, always being available. The greatest lesson I've learned can be summed up in one phrase: self-respect. It's when I finally realized my own worth, learned how to set healthy boundaries, and demanded the respect I deserve. And I realized something from the bottom of my heart. I am worthy of the absolute best. A genuine love, unconditional respect, and a life where I am the main character. When someone tries to pull me down, I now understand that the problem isn't with me, it's with them. I used to think that maybe it was too late for me. But then, the story of Mrs. Elena Miller inspired me. At 72 years old, she showed me that age is just a number, and the fire inside of me never truly goes out. Starting over? I know it's never too late. Finding myself again? It's always the right time. Happiness? I deserve it. Right now. Thank you for taking the time to listen to my story. To catch more inspiring journeys and build a community of strong, happy women together, please subscribe to our channel today